Hey everybody, Edo here, and I am excited because I have Chad Elkins on the line from 25th Century Games. Say hello, Chad.
Hello, how you doing?
I am good. So this is an interesting one.
Yeah.
I have a regular call with Keith Matejika from Thunderworks Games, and we were talking about you.
What?
And yeah, we were talking
Keith
about
knows
you.
who I am? Come
Yeah,
on. This
yeah.
is like
Absolutely. Well, we were talking because I first I hadn't met you, was in correspondence with you when you were running your Christmas Lights Kickstarter. I did
right.
a Kickstarter preview for it. And
Yep.
like Christmas Lights, is a cute little, what I would consider sort of indie Kickstarter game, right?
Yep.
Straightforward design, deck of cards, cute, but fine art, like just basically the type of game where I'm like, oh, this is somebody in their first Kickstarter. Now, actually, it wasn't your first. You did Robots Ice Cream, the card game, which
Right.
I haven't played. I can ask you about in a second. But
Not a lot of folks did. So it was a pretty small one. But
yeah,
yeah.
no, right. But then there's like, so this is what we were talking about. You look like an indie guy,
Yeah.
and then there's Space Explorers, which looks like a localization project, and you can
It
tell me
was.
if it is or not, which is like not what normally indie guys do. Then you got Kingswood, which, or well, I don't know. Let me make sure I get the order here. No, yeah. Then you had Kingswood, which looks
Mhm.
back to like a second indie project.
Right.
But then you've got this chicken,
Whatever chicken dinner.
winner chicken dinner. And then the production value goes like through the roof.
Right.
Actually, I just got Kingswood. Kingswood's also through the roof, but Chicken came out first. Um, and like, I feel like I saw it in Target. I'm not sure if I did. You can tell me if I didn't.
I wish. No. That was
But like,
definitely
it
not in
feels
Target.
like a Target game.
Right.
And then you have Jurassic Parks and all these other things. And so what we're like, we just want to know. We just want to know what the story is because it's
Right.
like it doesn't look like what you would normally look like. And so, what is 25th Century about? Like, how did it start? What's your
Right.
story? How did you go through these other sort of like internet loc deal, super high quality kids game? Like, what is we don't understand.
I mean, I would still, I absolutely still just think of myself in the exact same kind of place I was even with Christmas lights. And there's no, I say we, it's the royal we. I mean, we and the collection of people that I work with regularly. It's still just me. Like I'm still one person shop, right? You know, much like yourself, you're just kind of like a mission control for all the different stuff that I don't know how to do.
Sure.
It is also still not even a full-time job for me.
But how do you source a plastic chicken? I don't know how to source a plastic chicken.
Yeah, so that was I just asked, hey, like I want to put a rubber chicken in this game. Can y'all figure it out and find one? And we actually even talked about molding and making one that was custom for the game. That was apparently a default standard chicken you can just get in different sizes through like whatever sourcing happens over in China. But we actually did even consider if that game had actually really blown up and done really, really well, we were eventually going to have a stretch goal that would have been a custom, literally created a custom chicken just for this game, but which would have been a lot more expensive. We certainly couldn't afford to do
And
that.
I mean, generally speaking, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pulling this up as I go, but you're in modest, successful Kickstarter land, right? Like you're about where I've been with most of my stuff, right? Where you're in like a 20 to 50 type. Have any of these like blown up beyond that?
No, 1,500 backers is pretty
Yeah,
much the most we've seen, and I've seen that one twice. We did it for 1,500 ish, I think, for Kingswood,
Kingswood and
Space Explorers. When I say Jurassic Parts was getting close to that, I think it was
yeah.
also
I mean,
13,
yeah,
1,400.
yeah. And
Chicken
that
Dinner, I
game,
think, was only just a few hundred. That one just didn't.
yeah.
Uh, you know,
It's very hard to get. I mean,
yeah, kids game. Yeah,
it's and like yeah, I think that's the challenge there. I mean, I think you can. Maybe we'll get to this in the call, but like when I look at your lineup, I could tell you just thematically and target audience why you're hitting in different spots. But okay, who are you?
Yeah.
Like where? Yeah, I think you're in Atlanta. Is that right?
I'm in Atlanta. Yep.
Oh,
Atlanta,
and
Georgia.
so how'd you come to game? I don't know if how many of these Q&As you've seen, but usually it starts with a little like, what was your game journey before you got into it? So like,
Sure.
how did you get into games, and then how did you come to the decision, I'm gonna make my own and go to
Right.
Kickstarter?
Yeah. So, probably had a regular board game group for years and years and years. Like we meet every Wednesday. This has been like a regular thing for me for 10 plus years, and really my board game hobby journey, a lot of it started like most people, right? Like Catan and, that kind of stuff. But really what kind of created my game group was when Last Night on Earth came out, like 12 years ago. Because we're like, oh, it's zombies, which it was like a big thing back at that point. We're like, this is kind of a cool game.
Zombies are endless. It's still a big thing.
And so that was what started. We kind of started meeting on Wednesdays and would play through the different scenarios. Then other folks were joining. And we're like, hey, well, I've also got this game, which like I never heard that game. So we started playing that, and then that just kind of exploded the collection. Like I was never a Magic the Gathering player. I
Sure.
still never played it. Played a little D&D when I was, like high school and stuff and middle school, but that wasn't Magic wasn't my entry point, which I think is for a lot of people. And so I was working where the whole first game ever came about. I was working at Dragon Army, which was a mobile video game studio startup here in Atlanta. And Robots of Ice Cream was their first mobile game. And so, seeing that, it was kind of like a little arcade shooter game. I thought, hey, it'd actually be kind of fun to convert that title, take the characters and stuff. Let's convert it over to a card game and see what happens. And I talked to the folks at Dragon Army about saying, hey, is there any interest in making the studio be a dual studio? Like you're doing board, physical and digital games like simultaneously for titles and just kind of leveraging the assets across both. And they just weren't interested in pivoting into board games. They just wanted to stay focused solely on the mobile games. And so I was like, well, hey, if I can make a card game with it, can I just license the characters and put it out? And they're like, yeah, sure. Like, let's give it a shot. And so that's how that game happened.
Well, and so and I was looking at it again while you were talking. So two questions there. So firstly, what job, like what's your video game job? Because I didn't realize you came in from Keith Matejika is a video game guy too. What job? So
I am not technical at all. So for me, it was more working there was around. I was doing some content writing, some in-game stuff, and at that point, I was doing a little bit of like marketing stuff for them. But my background is primarily product management. So that's day job,
and not uncommon for somebody who is in your role, right? Somebody,
right.
A producer, product manager, somebody who's able to manage lots of different skill sets and departments, right, and groups and communication. Okay, and then so I mean, I always think this is worth mentioning, especially for folks who hit some bumps. The first time in, you didn't fund,
right? Yeah, and so that was a little bit. Probably it was certainly one of those things where didn't really build the audience. It
sure.
Didn't have anything finished. Like it was still kind of a classic mindset of Kickstarter. We got some basic stuff.
The original
mindset. This is what we want to do. We got some stuff fleshed out. It's not done. We need the money, and then we'll go finish it and make it and send it to you. Which of course, even then, which was probably 5-6 years ago, wasn't working anymore. It sure as hell doesn't work now.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Well, so it absolutely works. Like there's the gadget Kickstarter stuff, which has to be pretty far along but not manufactured, and then there's the board game stuff. But if you go and you look up like some art project or some like dance group, like there's lots of things where people are getting funded for ideas.
Yeah.
But
just not in this space.
Not in this space on Kickstarter. But so, and I guess you did a puzzle between the two.
Yeah. So I kind of reset back, and being in Atlanta, like I was involved in some historical boards, and I give historical tours, in Atlanta, and so I wanted to do a very hyper local project just for Atlanta, and this old 1892 map of Atlanta was painted by a famous cartographer, Library of Congress type of a thing. So it's not like I had to go, buy it. And basically, I just converted it into a puzzle, and did that project first to kind of start get used to the platform, like how does it function. Because that also wasn't a huge campaign either. I mean, it was a project we loved, which I was really excited about. Back then, I was like, "Whoa, hey, all right," And then kind of started that piece, and then went back to Robots of Ice Cream, got that across the funding line,
right,
limped it across, right? I mean, it was barely funded.
Yeah. I've had those.
It was like last day limped across the line.
Those are very my I came out of the gate pretty successful, but financially it turned out to be a loss. So I don't know if I got it over the gate over in the right way, which was a liftoff. But then
right.
My third one, I think Sibling Trouble's first. So, Gem Packed Cards was like a 10K goal and closed at like 11K or 12K. And so that one was just stress the whole. I mean, a lot of them are stress. So now I really do like the backstory and the puzzle side of things is interesting. I spent some time researching what it would take to make an herbaceous puzzle game, which I enjoyed, but I didn't actually go through with it. So then you're like, okay, I've used this IP, barely funded, but and it's shipped, I presume. People have played this game.
Yeah. I mean, we printed 1,000 copies. It sold out. I mean, it was mainly just Kickstarter. We sold it some shows. Now, hit point, and it had like very, very minor retail distribution.
Right.
So,
and did you design that, or were you already working with other folks for design at that point?
The game design was mine. So that one and Chicken Dinner are the only two that were actually my designs. Right. Everything else has been other folks.
All right. So here's where it gets like weird and interesting. All right. So everything is like super local, super indie.
Right.
Sort of classic, sort of stereotypical story.
Normal process for a brand new. Yeah.
And so then there's Christmas Lights. The most weird and interesting thing about Christmas Lights is that it's about Christmas lights, I think. Right. And I don't even know if I'm mistaken. Did you even launch it during the holiday season? I feel like it wasn't. It was like June or something.
Yeah, it was like it's like May or something.
Yeah, I was like, why is this guy launching a Christmas game right now?
And so that was interesting because that game had been on Kickstarter twice before me. So it was. Yeah, so if you look up Christmas Lights card game, it was, or maybe 3 times. It might have been a 3-time attempt by the two original designers of the main game, and I was like, well, that's a cool idea. The execution, could be a little better, from like the art and just the overall game. And I reached out to them and I was like, hey, you guys have tried this, whatever, 2-3 times. Why don't we try to retool it, put some new art on it. And see if we can make it, because it's a neat small stocking stuffer type game, right? Like it's something that you would hopefully you would see sitting next to a register in the holidays, because it's only going to sell for like a month out of the year, right? Like It's not something that's ever going to be on a game store shelf year round. And so they were like, yeah, let's give it a shot. So
what do they got to lose?
Yeah, they've already lost 2-3 times in a row, and we retooled it pretty fast. Because at this point it was like February, or March, and so we went really, really quickly into getting it kind of all the art redone and kind of getting some things hammered out, because I wanted to print it and then have it be ready for that holiday season. Because otherwise I was going to have to wait for a whole another year before any stores ever take
classic Christmas product. Okay, but so this is already more interesting than I thought it was. This is fantastic.
Good. There you go.
And that's a great mug, by the way.
Thank you.
All right, so this is not your now you're not. I thought I had to go one deeper to get to strange. This is strange.
Yeah, it's gonna get stranger. We're gonna get weird.
No. Okay, but I'm just back really weird. Yeah, but hold on. But so you're like, all right, because like you're sort of, even though you did design robot ice cream, you are okay. You're working at a company, you see it cool, you're into board games, you're like, hey, let's marry this and do a Kickstarter. They're like, no. And you're like, well, what if I do it on my own? And they're like, fine, but you're fired.
Yeah.
Whatever. Like, I don't know how that worked out. But they're like, yeah, cool. Pay us the $500 $100 and then it fails and they're like, ha ha ha, never was going to work, and you had to deal with that. All right.
Yeah.
But then you came back and you showed them. All right. But then you're like, what am I going to do? And you're like, why don't I go look up failed Kickstarters and find one I like? How did you get to the point where you're like, the next best thing is to find a failed Kickstarter and reboot it, which I don't think a lot of people have been doing, and there's probably an opportunity there. Yeah. But what did, tell me about that.
Yeah, I stumbled across the game on Kickstarter, because I was at that point, I was backing games regularly. So, and the volume coming out each week, you pretty much could look at every single game that came out.
I remember those days. Those were good days.
Right. And I saw it and I was like, man, this game has promise. And so I had, was kind of watched it.
Their first time or their second
This
time?
might have been their second time through. And I think even a friend of mine reached out to me who also backs games regularly. And she was like, hey, have you seen this game? I don't think they're going to fund again. You should maybe team up with them. And I was like, oh.
Are they from your area?
No, hell no, they're from Canada.
Okay. Okay.
Not even anywhere close. And so we reached out and started talking. And actually, what's interesting, that game is getting a second edition for this holiday season because it's gone. We actually went back. We had really kind of rushed through the first design of it. It wasn't anything really
just
wrong
remember,
with it.
if you put a glass bulb in a box, it's a hazard for children.
Right. So that game could not be playing with 65 glass bulbs. That was not going to work for that game. But we ended up, so that one actually is coming back out again this holiday. We revised, streamlined the core game. And what was never in the core game was this bonus set of rules. Like because I was like, man, we got like these Christmas light bulbs. They're just bulbs. Like there's no writing.
It's
like a system almost.
Yeah.
So you basically made 11 other games originally, and now there's a 12th game in there for this time around. But so that thing was, it just kind of lined up, and we sold a lot of them. It actually, even though the Kickstarter itself wasn't like a huge success, the long tail for that game has been. And what's interesting, it's like we'll have thousands of copies sitting in the warehouse, for 11 months, and then they go out the door, once a year, and then we whittle that down. What's happened the last few years. So now we've had to go back and do a reprint.
Well, I mean, that's actually, what's interesting about that is the approach and vision or thought process you have around it is, very much a product. Like you're like, hey, here's a really good Christmas product. There's an opportunity here to have it. It's light. It's a stocking stuffer. You're thinking about the market and market opportunity as opposed to what somebody might normally do who's sort of indie, which is like, here's the game I want to make, right? This is the game you want to make. It was already made. This is the opportunity you saw. Well,
just like everybody, like in 3 months, like for most games, like that shelf, like you fall off it and it's done.
Yeah.
If it's a pure holiday game, and I don't think you could do this maybe like Easter or whatever. I think Christmas is probably specific. No. Halloween games people play year round, but Christmas games every year people start thinking about, well, what Christmas games are out there?
Yeah, I think it's a broader opportunity. I was at a KOA campgrounds and there was this fire starter game where it was like a marshmallow roasting game, and so I think that's just the big opportunity I have not had. It's not that I haven't had the bandwidth. I haven't done it. Is with Herbaceous, which has been a fantastic hobby game. Right. I never was like, where this should be? I should get this into flower stores because, or planting, whatever they're called, gardening stores. That's the word. Because that's where this audience. That's like a big part of where my audience for that game goes, and it's just like a different market challenge. Like it's not just like, hey, distributors, because they don't. You got to
It's a whole different distribution world.
It's also more like I gotta go find them all and call them. I just haven't done it, right? But there's an opportunity there, and so I think the board game space has now grown big enough that you can start making those types of specialty bets, because specialty, what I think people forget is the board game industry is still super small. Specialty in a bigger industry is still huge. Often compared to board games. All right, but hold on. Okay, so I get it. So that was more interesting than I was expecting. Now, let's go to Space Explorers.
Sure.
I mean, this is like some. Is it, I want to say Russian. It might not have been Russian, but like.
It was Russian.
Okay,
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, I also know your execution's starting to go up in terms of the art, the look, the feel, the theme. But so was that? This was a game that was 100% done. Like, is it literally just a loc deal for the U.S. or
It was a totally localization deal. So
okay.
we redid the graphic design of the rule book, you know, and because I wanted to make it. It was already pushing the 60s vibe. I wanted to take that rule book and really amp that kind of classic NASA feeling up. So made it look like you're literally flipping through a binder, like an old mission control binder with like tabs, and there's coffee stains on it. So we made some aesthetic, you know, changes there. But that was a weird one because I was just cruising. I think I was just cruising BGG looking for space games because I've always loved space history. I worked at NASA for a few years, and you know, I was just cruising for any space game I could find, and I found this game, and I was like, "Oh, this game looks awesome!" I'm like, "Damn it, it's in Russian," you know.
Okay, so this was just as a player at this point.
Yeah, just as a player, and so I contacted the Russian publisher through BGG, and I said, "Hey, like, can I just get a copy of this game? Like, I don't know where to buy it. I just want to buy a copy of it. I'll figure out." It looked like I could probably find a way to translate it, whatever, somehow. And they're like, "Yeah, sure, we can get you a copy." Then we just started talking, and I was like, "Well, why don't I just make it like in English for y'all?" And so we met at Gen Con. They're like, "We're on Gen Con in a few months. Why don't we just meet there, talk about it, you know, hammer it out?" And that's what we did. And so that's how Space Explorers happened, which was kind of this weird, unplanned. You know, I was just trying to find a game that was just a cool space game, just for personal play.
Well, and so it's okay. So it sounds like,
and that one's done well. I mean, that one's in Barnes and Noble. You know, it's actually it was probably the first title that started getting, I guess, a little more attention. You know, on 25th.
Okay, so then back to Kingswood, which coming back looks like what I would have expected a second project to be. It you know still had that sort of indie game vibe, but interesting mechanics and its own sort of visual space. So like you know it feels like it's in the zone. It was from a Kickstarter perspective. It was a really nice trend and trajectory for you. You had the barely made it. Christmas Lights did a little better. Space Explorer broke 1,000. Now you're at 1,500. That's a pretty good move through.
Right.
And it's fantasy, an interesting mechanic. Had a Edo preview. You know all the important things. Okay, and that it sounds like was you saying, "Hey, I want to do another game," and this is the one you said. This was the other one you actually designed, right?
No. So Kingswood is Henry Audubon.
Oh, you're the next one. Okay, sorry.
I was chicken dinner. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So then, how did you put this Kingswood together?
Yeah. So yeah, that one happened to be Proto ATL, which I mean Atlanta, and so Proto ATL is kind of the like Proto San Jose and stuff like that. Sure. Protospill. So I met Henry Audubon there. Actually, Proto ATL was taking place like an hour north of Atlanta. So Henry came into downtown, which is where I live, and so I picked him up and took him out there to where it was at. So we got to talking that weekend. And he's like, "Hey, I got a design I want to show you," and so we played it, and it's just a really smooth little rondel. It's a very, and it's fantasy themed, and this is really kind of this is, with the exception of Robots Love Ice Cream, which I guess kind of. Even that one doesn't really hit this mark because in Christmas Lights kind of existed beforehand in a way. Kingswood was almost the first design from someone else that was just a pure design and then kind of marching through the development process. You know, because even Robots Love Ice Cream, since it was mine, it didn't really have the same type of development process. You know,
and so at this point, where are we? Have you made $1 at this point? Like on the business side, would you say it was like because for me for a long time it was basically like enough like the money paid for the run, and then it was like sort of like I had this like $10,000 starter kit of money that was sort of like funding the next one, and I'd earn enough to be there. Are you in that zone, or were you like no I was starting to be able to take a little money out and spend some more money, or where were you at this point?
Still at this point, my checkbook has not seen $1 like positive come into it. the everything now that's being made, and this year, of course, wrecked all kinds of stuff that was from a planning perspective, but everything now goes right back in because now I'm moving into where you're running parallel levels of development. So early on, it was like project, okay, new project. You had like a linear path, which is never really going to get you moving to a point where this can get bigger. You eventually got to get to a parallel set of development, and that means parallel sets of development, like with art, like things you have to spend money on, because you can run parallel prototype development, right? You can just do design work, but it's once you have to start outlaying cash for art, graphic design, things like that. That's where it can really start to get expensive. So nothing has come out. My wife would like to see that in part happen at some point, but because because she sees what it's like, and this. I mean, like you work all day, and you get at night, you're up late, doing stuff. Weekends you're doing stuff, and so it kind of is it's a major investment of spare time.
Oh yeah, I don't think people get it. I mean, perhaps they get it, but the only time I've taken any money out of Pencil First Games was after the Skull Hollow Kickstarter,
which was a huge success for you.
That was the first one, and not a lot of money at all. Like where I was like, I did all the math and looked at all the funding and what I projected would be our print run, and then what I thought we could do a distribution, and I was like, I could probably take a little, and like we're talking like $5,000 little, like we're not talking like I think if I could take a little out of here, and then so otherwise, everything I do is all because it's exactly what you said. It's like I could take money out, or I could kick off the next art on the next project, or get the graphic design, or just have money in that bank account so that when I need it, it's there. So that's where it sounds like you still have a full-time job, right? That's where it's this jobby thing where it's sort of like there for you that and it's bringing passion and interest and engagement, but it's not like, that's just where it's like, it's so far from being at a financial point where you could like be like, no, I'm going to be full-time. Like, Keith, because he's the third person in this conversation. I mean, I remember when he went full time, and it was still sort of dicey.
I remember like your video you guys were talking about, and it's very absolutely true. Yeah, I mean,
and since then,
that's a big shift.
He's nailed it, man. He's continued the role player. Cartographers has been a huge. So he it was a success, but it's still a pretty big leap. You really need that evergreen, hyper successful title to have the type of place to go. But I want to get because we're already like halfway here. Okay, so. You do that, you're feeling good. This wasn't your design, but you did all the development, and though you ran through the goals, and then you're like, all right, I've got an idea. So how did you get to this not? I mean, I don't want to undercut the design because I actually think the design's
it's simple,
very good.
It's not.
No. I really thought I missed that Kickstarter. And I don't know you. I don't know if I said no. I probably did. I think you probably just didn't ask me, but we're going to set that aside for a moment. But
I think you said no. I think we can probably go back to the email chain. I think it was too tight. I think you were like, I'm too big.
Yeah. So if somebody asks me and it's like sub 4 weeks or 6 weeks, even if you're like I've done 12 of yours, I'm like, hey, this is ridiculous. Sorry. So maybe it was that. But I played it when you sent me a review copy.
Right. I sent you a final, version of it.
Yeah. And it's like a young family game, right? Like it's targeted at kids. It's for kids.
Right.
And it's, and so I guess did you just have a son? I mean, how did you get to wanting to make this kids game?
Yeah, so that design had been really in that prototype for that game started when I was still making Robots Love Ice Cream. Like that's how far it went back. It was like a multi-year old design, and I kept tinkering with it and then just kind of never got to a place where I felt really confident with it. And it just finally, it was getting to a point where, you know what, this is actually it's really starting to take shape and I think it's probably finally there. And then that decided just to pull the trigger on it. And really, I had nothing else. I had some other stuff way early on I was tinkering with, but for me, I have nothing else that I'm working on personally. So this is probably my last ever, my design, probably thing. But because I actually really enjoy everything else around it more, I think, than like the initial. Sure, I'm just not a great initial designer.
Sure, no.
I love, it's just not a strong suit for me. So, that was when I played around with it for a long time. And it was always kind of light. It was always designed to be light. I think it ended up getting a little bit lighter, I think, through development. It was a little bit heavier, but at that point I felt like it was sitting in a place that was like no man's land. Like I was between light family and something no gamer was going to play because it was too light for them. So it kind of pushed it back down a little bit to the kids side.
Right. And
it has beautiful artwork. Shauna did an amazing job on it. And the components were, we went kind of all out with that one. Like I said, the chicken was just a fun kind of throw in, but neoprene mats and stuff for a kid's game was a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and so I guess the question there is, is it totally underwater? Like I feel like, how did you? I feel meaning the production seemed so high on it.
Right.
May I ask how many? What was your print run? Your first print run?
That one we did only like maybe 2,500.
Yeah, so it's not like you're like, I printed 30,000. That's how I got a good price.
No. Yeah, it's definitely, this one is a little bit more. Was a little bit more of a passion project than a leverage it like from a unit X, landed X perspective. It's definitely not at the same, spread that the other ones are for sure. And it's if it was a go back for another print run, it would have to be because the order size was going to be pretty substantial. That was probably one where you could almost make it akin to the true indie original Kickstarter thing, where you're taking the money that costs per game and really spending a lot of it to make the game, as opposed to distribution business side of it, where the Kickstarter price might be here, but the unit cost is done here because of the 3-tier system you're planning for.
So
that's why I think that one's probably a little bit different.
That's what killed Liftoff, in that it was just way too much stuff in the too much value, and then the price point was too high to accommodate that at retail, whereas like it should have been cheaper, and then I could have had a lower price point. Ultimately, and it never went back to print. I did a deluxe, expanded deluxe edition recently, which is actually going to go to backers in the next month or so. But like, even there, I sort of just gave up on the value part, and I actually, because I originally was with Panda and then with Watts, so like they were like $4 cheaper per game already. But basically, I was like, forget it. I'm just gonna like reinvest that excess headroom back in, because it's not. I'm like, it's not gonna sell retail anyway.
But you're not even gonna send that one to retail, are you? So you're not even worried about.
I'm probably sending like 300 to retail, but like, like it's basically like there'll be some available for people eventually, but like for the most part, it's just no. And I think I'm really excited because I think backers realize it, but like when you get that box. Like I know because I've seen the box and you open it. Right. I'm even like, holy cow! Like I the things were a little loose. So I was like, put on that little plastic lid that keeps everything in place. Like, who cares? Just keep going.
Just put it in there. Well, and there's still space for that, right? Because that's like, I feel like that sometimes you just have to do. And I don't want to call it a passion project, but it's just it's a project for, again, that you want to make it and you want it to be a certain way component wise, and shoving value in it, because chicken dinner is still, even at retail now, it's $25, and that's
what blows my mind, because it, it feels like it's $8 what's in $8 in the box, but
right.
All right, and then so now like just
we're on the journey. What we do last, we did
it's Jurassic Park.
Chicken dinner.
So
Jurassic Park.
okay, but like Jurassic Park's parts, catchy name,
Right.
you know, popular theme. You're working with Kevin Lansing on the design, but you've worked you're Andrew Bosley, who's a hot artist, right? So it's very much, you know, getting to that point. A lot of sort of that second stage from indie Kickstarter publisher with we skipped the weird ones. Where it looks like, no, you're just like, now you're just learning how to do this. You're like, hey, let's get a good theme. Let's get the good game. Let's make it look great. Let's get a catchy name. That's what it feels like. Is that about right? Or was there more of a story there?
No, I think that's, I would say it's probably the evolution of the mindset is definitely shifted by that point. At that point, I shifted consolidators, retail distribution was getting broader, and Space Explorers had went into Barnes and Noble at that point, so it was I feel like the level of kind of where you need that, what everything needs to be at, just there's more pressure to be at a higher level, and I really think that point, not that it wasn't there before, and I think it's very important to think about everything in terms of a product. I think that and you talked about this thing before, allowing your league videos and stuff. You are making a product, and you've got to assemble. It's like you're assembling the Avengers for that product. And I think this one, was one where I was really trying to be very calculated in how I put that game together. For sure.
Yeah, and like the price point, I think you've done a really good job finding partners, but also maintaining a great aesthetic and production value for your games, right? Like Jurassic Park is a pretty small is a pretty small box, but the look and feel of it's fantastic. I mean, more than just the art, like the graphic design, the execution, the components. It's a really nice set of stuff. Another one I haven't played, but I mean, certainly looks. I look at this game, I'm like, oh, of course this did well, type of thing.
Yeah, and the execute that one, because it did well enough on Kickstarter. The tiles are a lot thicker. I think they're the 3mm thick tile. We're doing linen finish with spot UV on the tiles. I mean, it's when backers get this, and then retail, gets it, which is actually very soon. Like we are kind of just wrapping up Kingswood fulfillment, and I think Jurassic Parts was hitting Atlanta in the warehouse today, so it'll be going out to backers next month. It is a very high quality for cardboard, and some plastic, chisels and some gems and cards. It is a very high quality production product, for sure. And that was a focus. Like I wanted it to be that,
right,
at the end of the day.
And so this is just turning into like tell your Kickstarter story. But so then here's another. So like to me, it's really interesting in that you're looking for and finding a variety of opportunities in different places and doing a good job, for lack of a better term, exploiting it. Right. So for Tutankhamun, so you're like, was this your favorite game? Like, how did you I'm going to go reach out to Knizia and I found out he got his license for the title backer. Like, how did this one happen?
So I actually reached out to Reiner just about like, hey, this is kind of who I am. This is the wheelhouse area that I play in, which I think fits a lot of Knizia titles. And do you have anything that you think you might want to have us consider? Really,
he's like, let me go to this folder and just reach my hand in randomly and pull out.
Let me walk back into the store, like the Raiders of the Lost Ark, in storage, thing of like old, 700 titles from years past. No, so we started talking, and it was like, well, I got these other new stuff, but if there's some older stuff, we might consider that, bringing something back that's older. And we started kicking around random title names, and obviously a lot of them are locked up, for other reasons. And Tutankhamun I've had in my collection for probably 10 years. It was one of those games I kind of early on in my game group, and when I was finding games that I liked, I came across Knizia games. So I started buying a bunch of them, and like Lost Cities, and like, oh, they get very gateway, but they're very fun. And Tutankhamun I found out about, even though at that point it was, still probably 10 years old. and I had it. And so we were kicking around ideas. Tutankhamun came up, and I was like, that's like literally I could reach on my shelf and grab it. Like I know exactly what this game is. And I was like, you know what? If we're going to bring back an old title, like that one came out in '93. It's a Spiel title. It's a solid linear path set collection game. So it's just the design was, already great. Had a print run in the early 2000s from Out of the Box, which was the company who made Apples to Apples, was kind of their big hit. Sure. Which I guess they're defunct. I don't know whatever happened to them, but they're gone now. But what was interesting about that, the more I thought about it, as a product, if you think of most people, like it's probably the last 5 years, most people have kind of come into the hobby, for
there's tons of examples of that where the audience has never heard of any of these things.
Right. And that was the thing. It was like, so for people who've been in the hobby a long time, they'll probably be glad to see a version come back. We'll, put a new paint job on it, and we'll try to refresh some design elements to it. So that those folks might get excited, but for everybody else, it's just like a brand new game.
Right.
So that was an interesting, because it got Reiner and I working together. So we worked out, the God abilities in that game are brand new, so those didn't exist in the original, and that was something that came from us. And so, which was a little nerve-wracking the first time I pitched that concept. That was play tested a ton before he heard about that one. Because it wasn't like most designers, you're like, hey, I got a random idea. I played it once. It kind of works. What do you think? This was like, I played the bejesus out of that before he saw, that. And it got us working together. And we're doing a original game for next year together, a small card game. And then I'm bringing back another one of his older titles next year as well.
Awesome. And so this is, okay, so we've gone the length here.
Right.
And so you were talking about this a little bit, that linear project over project experience, getting to the point where you're starting to run projects in parallel, getting to that point where you're, doing quarterly releases, or maybe 2 or 3 a year, depending on your capacity, and so at this point, clearly, you're doing the, what's the name of that studio? It's not Retro Games. What's the name of the not Renegade. The guys who did Fireball Island. Restoration Games.
Restoration? Yeah.
You're like, I pick up old Kickstarters. I'm working with old developers on old designers on old games, on new games, licensing. Like, at this point, do you feel like there's a sweet spot that, like, any of these things you like the most, or is it more just you're still sort of opportunistic, looking at interesting things, and you just sort of think of your lineup as this sort of open opportunity space for, like, projects that pique your interest?
Right. There's no, like, set definitive plan. Like, Restoration has a very clear mission, and for me, it's more around, at the end of the day, like, I am trying to kind of, and there'll be a little bit of a pivot you'll see over the next year-ish, year to 2 years, around creating, like, basically like 2 tracks. So you've got 2 paths where, like, really kind of at a price point and a audience path, and there'll be like separation there. And as long as something kind of hits in that range, and I feel like it fits the audience, then I think it doesn't make a difference where the idea comes from. Whether it's a failed Kickstarter, that we're like, hey, let me help you, and we can work together to kind of amp that up a little bit, or a localization deal, which I'm still got a couple things I'm in consideration for that. Or brand new original from scratch, which there are several things, in the pipeline for that too. So it's good ideas can come from anywhere. I think you just still have to kind of keep your ears open and your eyes open, for them.
Awesome. Cool, man. Well, this was absolutely, this exceeded my expectations. This was super interesting, man.
Well, we had, like, no plan. Like, you're just like, hey, you want to chat? I'm like, oh, sure, let's chat.
Well, this was, as I said at the head of the call, like, this was literally me talking to Keith, looking at how you've been doing your business and being like, what the hell is this guy? Like, what? These zigs don't make any sense. Right. Or they zags. And so I was like, why don't I just interview the guy and then we can find out the answers to all these questions. So I want to once we post this video, I'm going to just send it to Keith and I'm going to be like, here,
Right.
there you go. That's the answer to all the questions.
Yeah, I mean it was definitely a weird, cause there was another puzzle project that was in the mix we didn't even talk about because it wasn't on Kickstarter. It was I did on Indiegogo, so like a completely different platform, right? Yeah, and it was that was one where it was the third project, so it was after Robots Love Ice Cream and after the Atlanta map puzzle, which I still make. So
that's cool.
And it's local. I sell it just myself. And then I actually for a lot of this one, local museums and stuff in the Atlanta metro area, like history museums, like I'll sell it to them at cost, and then they can use it for fundraising in their gift shops and stores. And but I did this project with a local artist here in Atlanta. His name was Kyle Brooks. Black Cat Tips is his artist name, but he painted this painting for me, and we had it digitally shot, turned it into a puzzle, and did it as a fundraiser for 4 different local charities. Got all the proceeds for it, but it was we printed like 1,500 of them, I think, and sold them all.
Cool.
But that was just a charity project. But yeah, it's now I've got 2 games going straight to retail coming out in October, so I'm trying that for the first time.
I mean, which
is interesting.
I was again just to end on Keith here, like what a that's a hard bet. I mean that is a risky bet, and he did that with cartographers, and not only was it a huge hit. It won Spiel des Jahres,
that bet paid off for Keith for sure.
Oh, and it's so funny. I rib him so hard because he's doing Cartographers 2, and he's going to Kickstarter with it, and it was like, wait a minute, wasn't the point of Cartographers to have the opportunity to go to retail and skip Kickstarter? And not only that, it was an absolute huge success. So you have this absolute huge success, and you're like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back to Kickstarter with it. What's going on, man? He wants to do a deluxe version and stuff, but
if you want to do like a deluxe, I think you just have, obviously you have to, but but yeah, and obviously with that, especially the Spiel piece, like now his business model is shifting into localization of his own titles, not like, he
does a ton of, he actually even has a localization partner. He has a Elizabeth who actively goes out and find and like handles that whole. It's actually one of the few places where he has like a real a proper rep working. I mean, anyway, it's his stuff, but like he has a lot of localization deals. Like whereas I'm still, if I have a local deal, it's because somebody did it with me, and I'm managing it and all that stuff.
Right.
But
yeah, and I'm like kind of in that same transition. For obviously, Tutankhamun is going to be. We've got a lot of publishers around the world interested in that one. And then Jurassic Parks, actually in Kingswood, is going into a few countries. So Jurassic Park should do that. And that's just like a shift in the business. Like I wasn't thinking about that 2 years ago.
No, if you do it well, I mean, I have all sorts of opinions and localizations on what to do and what not to do. But if you start having enough partners, that ends up being something that is the equivalent of a Kickstarter type thing, where you're like, oh, I just printed 10,000 units. They were all paid for. They all are going to make some money. But anyway, it has been a pleasure having you on. Thanks so much, Ed, for your time this morning. And I look forward to seeing your upcoming games.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for the time. This is the first time we've actually ever talked. I've always been over like Messenger.
For sure, man. Awesome.
I appreciate the time. It's good.
Thanks. Bye. Hey everybody, Edo here, and thanks for watching Gaming with Edo. Reviews over here on this playlist, League and Insider videos over here on this one. Subscribe, share, all that good stuff. But most importantly, play some great games. Thanks.